We all remember how our encounter with Huggy Wuggy ended at the end of Chapter 1. Let's just say he didn't pick the best moment to attack us, and like a sack of potatoes, he tumbled down, crashing into every possible pipe along the way. Even back then, it seemed like the fall wasn't that high, and the injuries weren't that severe to completely take down a monster like him. But the moment we finally reached the end of Chapter 4, something happened that fans had been waiting for over 3 years.
Security is very important to us here. If I were you, I'd start running.
By the way, there's a theory that Leith Pierre is actually Huggy Wuggy, but that's a topic for another day. And now, after 3.5 years, we finally see Huggy again. And what do we get? A mutilated body, half an arm missing, and some nightmare fuel on his head. Doesn't that seem a bit weird? I mean, these injuries don't match up at all with what should have happened after his fall in Chapter 1. And that's where things start getting really interesting, right? After the final scenes of Chapter 2 and 3, most fans were convinced that the prototype had taken Huggy for further experiments. And honestly, that made perfect sense. But what actually happened will seriously surprise you. The first thought that popped into players' heads after seeing Huggy again was, who the hell did this to him? And who the hell saved him? We'll talk about the first part later, but as for the second, there were tons of theories. Some believe Poppy saved him. There's even a theory that Huggy is a good guy now and he's back to help us. Some think Poppy or even Kissy Missy talked to him and convinced him to return. In fact, a lot of people are convinced that Kissy was the one who got through to Huggy, and that at the beginning of Chapter 5, we'll see Kissy standing right behind our good old Huggy. But here's a little challenge for you. What small detail in this scene completely destroys that theory?
An obvious question with an obvious answer.
You... What did you do with Ollie?
I'm right here, Poppy.
For you,
I'll always
be here.
The doctor, Catnap, Mommy and Huggy, they're all dead. You have nothing now. No one. And soon, you'll have less than that. All those years. Was there ever an Ollie?
Yes, there was.
But that was a very long time ago. Let me tell you what comes next.
I'm going to
Come up there.
and I'm going to
Find you. Your collaborators. The few you have left, they will be dealt with.
Yeah, you heard that right. If you caught the sound of footsteps and noticed Poppy and Kissy's reactions, you're on the right track. And let's not forget that Poppy straight up says that Huggy is dead, which means there's no way she had anything to do with his return. And honestly, if Kissy knew the truth about Huggy, Poppy would have known too. That's why it's pretty clear that these two had nothing to do with his legendary comeback. Oh, and remember that huge mystery from Chapter 3? The attack on Kissy? After this scene, a lot of people started thinking, wait, what if it was Huggy? But considering everything we just talked about, I think it's pretty obvious that the real culprit was the prototype. Now, you might argue, what if those footsteps belong to the prototype? Which, fair point. But there are a few things that just don't add up. We know that the prototype is massive, but that monster was moving pretty fast. A lot like Huggy when he made his big return. And let's be real, the prototype isn't exactly built for speed. On top of that, the prototype plays more of a big brother role. He's not the type to get his hands dirty. Instead, he prefers to send his pawns to do the work for him. And of course, during the conversation with the prototype, we don't hear any of those distortions that were clearly echoing around our location. I think you get what I mean. There were also theories that Huggy was saved by Dr. Harley Sawyer, but considering his, let's say, condition, that's absolutely impossible. So in the end, we're left with two options. Either the prototype saved Huggy, or it was some unknown character. But since everything is pointing to Chapter 5 being the finale, it's unlikely they'd introduce some big new character this late in the game. Which means the only logical answer is that the prototype saved Huggy. But why? Let's break it down. Many noticed that the distance between the place where we dropped Huggy and the underground lab is insanely huge. And there's no way Huggy, especially in that condition, could have made it there on his own. This once again points to the idea that whoever saved Huggy had a well-developed mind. Because let's be real, someone like Yarnaby wouldn't have figured out how to transport him. Just a little fun fact, most likely there was someone else in that first location besides Huggy. And after this secret creature tried to finish off the dying Huggy, someone might have stepped in to help. It was probably one of the prototype's close allies. And considering Dr. Sawyer's abilities and his connection to the prototype, he definitely knew Huggy was in trouble. So someone could have come to his aid and then taken him to the prototype. Or maybe it was the prototype himself. That part is still unknown. Then things got even more interesting. Prototype healed Huggy's wounds and gave him time to rest and regain strength. While some people are theorizing that Huggy might now be on our side, I'm still almost completely sure that's not the case. By the way, Huggy's return only makes me think more that Chapter 5 is going to be the grand finale of the Poppy Playtime saga. And it also hints that we might meet other previous antagonists in Chapter 5, which I'll definitely get into later. Right now, we know for sure that Huggy, Mummy, Catnap, and the Doctor were all allies of the prototype, and they're probably the strongest of his crew. If Chapter 5 promises a showdown with the prototype, he's definitely going to need some powerful allies. And Huggy is the perfect fit for that. I think the prototype decided to save Huggy because he knew he'd need him again soon to try to kill us. And if things are heading in this direction, let's talk about who else might rise from the ashes thanks to the prototype's experiments and join his so-called army. Let's start with the well-known Mommy Longlegs.
What have you done? You make me part of you! You can't do this to me!
I think we don't even need to comment on this. No matter how genius the prototype is, there's nothing that can be done with Mommy Longlegs. At best, he could try to make her a prototype 2.0, but that's really stretching it. Next up is the Doctor. Since we completely destroyed his brain, his chances of being revived are pretty much zero. But the situation with Catnap isn't as obvious as it seems at first glance. We understand that the prototype definitely harmed the cat, but here's the thing. Catnap was still alive during the encounter with the prototype's claw. And if you take a closer look, you'll notice that the prototype placed his fingers near Catnap's mouth without actually harming his brain. This means that there's a high chance we could see a Catnap 2.0 return in Chapter 5. And the most unexpected possibility for a new ally of the prototype? Poppy. We saw her escape because her life's purpose was completely destroyed, but the real secret lies in that VHS tape.
So awful. I didn't want... This wasn't what I thought we were gonna leave. Leave the factory. Not this. All those people. prototype says we can't leave. Not now, not ever. I hate him. I hate him, and I hate this place, and I hate that he's... right. He explained everything, and he's right. We can't leave. It's too risky. What they did to us, we can't ever let it happen to us or anyone ever again. Doesn't make me feel better about the bodies, though. What he was saying about them. I know there's not really another option. The toys will starve otherwise. They'll die. But it's still disgusting.
We know that Poppy was once the prototype's friend, if you could put it that way, and only later did things turn cold between them. But let's be real, in the state Poppy was in, it's easy to believe that out of desperation, she could have reached out to the prototype. Honestly, I'm not too convinced by that either. So it looks like the prototype's serious allies will definitely be Huggy, and most likely Catnap. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments. Bye for now!